Welcome to our first episode. This is an episode that I was excited about recording because of my interview with Jamie. So Jamie Irvin is somebody who's been successful in business. He found a really unique niche in heavy-duty trucking, and he is a phenomenal consultant in that industry. He has his own podcast, very successful in its own right. When you make a lot of money from podcasting, it's successful. But he's somebody who has a lot of depth, and he's thought through business. He went through a big restructuring in his old company and went through that really well because of some of the tools he found to work through that. So that's something we're going to be talking about, is the restructure and tools that we can use to get the most out of people. Now, one thing that we talked about, and I'm going to refer to this after our interview, so stay tuned for that. After the interview, I'm going to discuss some of the research I did to think through how much does it cost to hire somebody. This is something that is not very concrete. I saw a lot of numbers, did a bunch of research. I believe I've got something good for you. There's a lot that goes into it, and it costs us a lot of money when we don't make the right hire, when we need to rehire, retrain, do all of those things. So enjoy the interview with Jamie. Afterwards, stick around, and I will be sharing some of that research with you. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I'm with Jamie Irvin today, and I'm excited about this one because Jamie was helping me a lot on my podcast as he is a very, very accomplished podcaster himself. So maybe start with this, Jamie. Start by telling us about your business. What does HDC do? And then tell us a little bit about the podcast as well. I want to plug that as well.
Sure. So I'm the CEO of the Heavy Duty Consulting Corporation. We believe that we're the only consulting corporation in the world that focuses exclusively on heavy duty parts for the trucking industry. We work with suppliers and distributors primarily, as well as repair centers that are looking to get into the heavy duty parts game. And the Heavy Duty Parts Report, our podcast, actually came first. So I started it 5 years ago when I was a sales account manager selling heavy duty parts. And lucky number episode 13, the guest was the CEO of Diesel Laptops, a diagnostic tool company. And he reached out to me afterwards and offered me a job. And I said, I'm not looking for a job. I want to start another company. And he says, great, start a consulting company. I'll be your first client. And the rest is history.
Excellent. And again, what do you consult on? How do you help some of your clients?
So primarily it started with people reaching out to us saying, hey, we see what you're doing on the podcast. You're very successful in sales and marketing. Can you help us grow our business? And so we would look at their sales department. We would look at their digital marketing, and we would find opportunities to optimize their business and provide them with guidance on how to do that. Very quickly, though, there would be issues on the technology side where maybe as they were transitioning from the traditional distribution model to a digital sales channel, there were issues there. I had experience in that in the past with a company that I sold in 2016 that wasn't a heavy duty parts company, but it was still a blue collar industry, and many of the principles applied, and certainly the technology was the same. And so I would advise on that. And then inevitably, if we did get them to a place where they started to grow operationally, things would start to fall apart. The added demand and the increased volume, the issues that maybe were not being addressed started to come to the surface. And so people in organization became a big part of what we did. And of course, with my history with traits and the longtime use of that platform and that tool, I understood the importance of having the right people in the right place and everything that goes along with traits. And so we called up Traits and said, we need your help and we want to start promoting your tool and using it in our consulting business. And so we were able to successfully do that as well.
You're obviously good at podcasting because you're doing the segues for me here, Jamie. I appreciate that. So let's get into the people part of this. In your opinion, what is the most important to understanding personality and its impact on behavior?
Well, I think the mistake a lot of people make is they go, oh, yes, I know what psychometric assessment is. I've taken one of those ones. We don't even have to name them, but they put people more in buckets than they do actually mapping their specific personality traits and correlating that to what would be considered very consistent behavior for people with that combination of personality traits. And I think that's That's a big mistake people make with it. And myself, when I view the behavior of an individual relative to the performance I'm looking for, I understand that people can't really change. They can only shift those personality traits around a little bit, depending on their behavior adaptability, but you get what you get. And if you try to force someone to go down a road where they're just not built for it, it's like driving a car in first gear on the highway. You can do it for a while, but eventually something's going to go bang. And so when I look back at my own business career and when I look at the businesses that I've built, I'm a big student of Michael Lee Gerber and systemization, and I'm a huge believer in the role of psychometric assessment and how the people's traits dictate their behavior more times than not. When you get those two things working in concert together, though, what you get is you get a really dependable business where you can actually look forward and say, hey, if we put these inputs in, we know we're going to get those outputs. And to me, that's a really important thing. And it's progressively becoming more important as the world becomes, let's say, more of a dynamic place, and the business landscape is changing so dramatically. I don't care what business you're in. Demographic conversion is something that's happening. It's a global phenomenon. It's only going to get more difficult. Young people are not interested in the, maybe the traditional careers of the past generations. And so there's a lot of disruption going on. And if you can find that quiet little consistent place in the world, not only is that good as a business owner, but it's great for customers because they're really, really craving consistency wherever they can find it because it's not really available in too many places anymore.
Yeah, you used the word psychometric assessment. And the word that usually comes out, or the phrase that people use, or the term, is personality tests. And to me, that has certain connotation. You said this. It tends to put people in boxes, and they're simplified. You got 4 or 16, or you've got some like round number that works together, and that's fine. It is what it is. There are definitely advantages to those things, but with psychometric testings that we've done, or assessments that we've done, it's starting to bring out some of the complexity. And you started talking about that. How do you take a complex organization in a complex industry and start putting complex inputs in here and expecting complex outputs? How do you get that all going with a simple personality test, right? So maybe jump into that. Talk about the inputs versus outputs. When you're looking forward in a company and you're going, what is the strategic plan for the next 5, 10 years, whatever it is? How do you then use the psychometric assessment in order to help you place the right people in that organization?
Well, I'll give you an example of a client that we're onboarding right now. Nationwide, they employ a lot of people across various departments. Specifically, they're trying to, they've just done a merger, so they're trying to bring together 2 sales teams that were in 2 different parts of the country, operating under 2 completely different paradigms. And now they have this unified objective with this now nationwide footprint. And everybody is feeling a little out of water here because it's like, okay, so, when we were in the West, we did it this way. And when we were in the East, we did it that way. And so the first thing that I did is I said, before you move into trying to train these people into what you want them to become, first of all, you have to identify what are the objectives for the business. And before we look at anybody who works for you, what kinds of people would you need to employ to go from where you are today to where you want to be in that 5-year plan? And once we establish that, then we can look internally and say, well, who do we have? And I love Jim Collins' metaphor or illustration when he says you in his book, Good to Great, he said, you got to get everybody off the bus and you got to get the right people back on the bus sitting in the right seats. And, in this particular example, that's exactly what we're going to do for them. We're going to first establish what are the objectives and what kinds of people do you need working for you. That's the job model. And once we have that established, then we can look at the employees. Then we can say, okay, with the employees that you have, there are certain open positions now that you have to fill. Assuming we fill those positions, what gaps now in each of those positions are there? And what kind of training would be needed to get them to the level where they could actually then use their inborn personality traits to the maximum capacity And can we train them what they need to go out there and just do what they are built to do already? And can we enhance that? See, that's a completely different strategy than what most companies do. Most companies say, we need our salespeople to sell more. And you know what we found? We found a lot of our salespeople are just not asking for the orders. They're not assertive enough. Like, we need them to be more assertive. Let's train them to be more assertive. And it never works.
Yeah. So I've seen that in my own life. There are things that I've struggled over and over and over in business, Jamie, and just keep hitting my head against the wall. And then all of a sudden, I realized, like, part of it was going through assessments myself, but part of it just based on life experience was saying, I am never going to be good at these things. Why do I keep trying? Why don't I hire for this or partner for this? And I will work on those things that I'm excellent at. And you know what? Again, so I've got my own company, I've got a business partner, and that's exactly what I did. I went out and found somebody who had a lot of strengths that I didn't have, that I would never have. And I realized, listen, I'm gonna double down on my strengths, and I'm gonna double down on her strengths, and we will work together really well. And that does play a large role in something. It's funny, you talked about getting off the bus, putting the right people in the right seats back on the bus with the book that you were talking about, as well as you mentioned a vehicle driving in first gear. And when you said the vehicle in first gear, what came to my mind is my brother loves cars. Like, he is a vehicle connoisseur. He doesn't care what kind of car it is. And I actually asked him sometimes, I've said, like, his name's Andrew. I said, Andrew, like, what's good or bad about this vehicle? Or do you like this vehicle? And he said, don't ask me if I like it, because every single vehicle has a purpose. He said, like, a Toyota is reliable and the resale value is fantastic, and you get a good vehicle for what that is. Now, you don't buy a Toyota for F1 racing. That's not the purpose of the Toyota. You buy it for these purposes. This is its role. You buy the Ferrari or the whatever it is, right? For the faster vehicles and something that has more power, towing capacity. Well, you need a different vehicle for that. And I think about that with people going, again, what you said. What are the roles we need? What do we need in order to get to where we want to be? Do we have that within our organization? If not, how do we hire for that and specifically look for those pieces? I love the way you put that.
And I think one of the big challenges, of course, is if we had an infinite budget, we could just hire all the people we wanted with all the specific expertise and roles. And when you're in a business, like, you know, in the environment I'm in right now, we're building a business where, you know, we have limited funds and capital available to us, and we have to make sure that we make good decisions. And sometimes we have people doing more than one job. And that's where I think you really need to understand the differences between someone who's out in front building the future for the company, someone who is doing the day to day and really that strong implementer role, and then somebody who can facilitate between the two. Because I know I'll freak somebody out if I come in and start talking about what the business is going to look like 5 years from now, if they're, you know, that strong implementer who really is just focused on today's work. So and I think as you move through this, you have to look at what you have today and you have to do the best you can with it, but you need to start orienting yourself towards utilizing people for their strengths and trying to find ways of moving assignments around within the team to make sure that at least, you know, 85% of the time, each person is living in their strength and doing what they're naturally good at. And the rest of the time we're offsetting that with someone else's strength. And it's a challenge. If you have a smaller team, it's obviously a little easier as your team gets above, let's say, 50 employees. But that's, you know, small business is big business, as they say. It's over 70% of the business landscape. And so we're all faced with those challenges and those choices. But the insights that you gain with traits gives you the ability to make at least informed decisions. Even if you know, hey, look, I know I'm asking you to do something 10, 15% of the time you're not the best person on the planet to do, but I just need you to do that. But at least you're making an informed decision. You can communicate with that person about why we're deciding to do what we're doing. And you can also talk about how it's a temporary situation and how moving forward as the business scales, we're going to bring in people to take away those things that maybe they're not so good at.
Which would change the way that is taken by the employee in so many ways, right? If somebody goes, oh no, I'm going to have to, how long am I going to be doing this? Am I going to be wasted here? That's a very different situation than someone saying, hey, listen, I know this doesn't fit you perfectly. We need it for a period of time. It's going to be about this long, and then we're going to step you back into this other role or whatever. Now somebody knows it's kind of I know when I'm in there. I know when I'm out. I don't have to. I don't have to budget for wasting away the rest of my life, and I'm good to go on or move on. And that's something that I like. Is it allows us to have conversations when we have something to measure that by, if it's accurate, right?
Yeah, and there's good numbers around the cost of recruiting, but I don't think as much attention gets put on the true invisible costs of having poor retention. Like the better retention you have, it has such a negative impact on the business when you lose good people, because you're just making mistakes that are avoidable. You just don't have the knowledge to avoid them. And that's what Traits has done for me. It's made me very self-aware about myself. It's made me very aware of who I'm working with, and how to manage them, and how to get the best out of them, and what to say and do to try to encourage them. All of those factors play a role in your retention rates, and retention, especially if you're in an environment like I'm in, where I think it's over 70% of employees in my industry are over 55. The next big chunk is 35 to 55, and there's less than 2% of the employees under the age of 30 in our industry. We've done a horrible job of attracting and recruiting young, talented people because they don't want to work in trucking. They want to work in, like in technology or something else. And so, man, if you do find someone that's good, you do not want to lose them because you mismanaged their natural skills and you put them in a position where they couldn't be successful and feel like they have a future.
Yeah. It's interesting, Jamie, because I think that a lot of founders, business developers believe that we are outstanding at finding the right people for the right position. What I've realized for myself, I can't speak for everyone, but what I've realized for myself is that I am right a lot of the time, maybe some of the time, a lot of the time, but I also get it wrong. And I've realized that more and more when I'm honest with myself. You talked about self-awareness. And now when I've got something objective, it allows me to ask more questions. It allows me to delve deeper into that rather than relying on a resume, something that somebody else is telling me, putting their best foot forward. It's like I can skip the dating process and go, hey, who is this person like in 5 years when we've already been married for a little while? Well, that's a better process, right? We understand what we're going to get out of a person. Okay, I wanted to ask, you've been talking about traits a little bit. One thing you referred to is you use the word implementer and initiator, and that's terms that we use in our assessments. And it's basically, you've got some people that are really geared towards leadership, towards risk taking, toward goal focused decision making, and you've got other people, and they're bigger picture thinkers. You've got other people who are kind of the opposite of that. And again, we're not putting people in boxes; these are broad, general terms. But the opposite of that would be somebody who just puts their nose down. They don't care about making decisions or wanting to be part of the process of every single thing happening. They just want to put their head down and do a phenomenal job at what they're excellent at. And putting those people in the same room can sometimes cause havoc. So you need other people in an organization to communicate between the two. Maybe share a little bit more about your experience with that.
Sure. Now I'll share a personal experience because it just exemplifies what we're talking about in such a great way. So I live in the future. I have a 25-year plan, and I break it down into 5-year, and then I break it into 3, and then down to a year, and then down to quarter. I know in general terms, I know what things are going to look like long before they happen. And I'm also involved in creating those things. So that, some of it's a cause and effect thing. My stepdad has worked in a lumber mill for 25 or 30 years now. His job is to stand on at the end of a conveyor belt, and lumber comes down and he grades it. And he is phenomenal at his job. One of those just amazing employees that you just dream of hiring because you just know exactly what you're going to get. And one day I was talking to him about his retirement and about what that was going to look like. And he heard me say that I have a 25-year plan, and he just stopped and he goes, "You think that far in the future?" And I'm like, "Yes, Dad. And I know you don't," which is why we're having this conversation. The thing is, though, is that if it wasn't for my wife acting as kind of like the middle ground between me and my dad, we are in opposite ends of the spectrum, right? This is a guy who is only focused on today. He is a phenomenal employee. He is a 10 out of 10 on emotional containment. Like me, I am expressive. I am analytical. I am future oriented. And you know exactly what I'm thinking and feeling just by looking at my face. So we're just two ends of the opposite spectrum. And my wife, she sits kind of in between us, and she translates for my dad, and she translates from my dad to me, and she plays that role of a facilitator. And I just think that that is such a good illustration of the three general categories of employees that you have in a company. You have people who are building the future. You have people who are working in the present, and you need that group in the middle so that the people in the future don't freak out the people in the present, right? They have that, there's facilitators in the middle. They have this unique ability to listen to the crazy founder who's coming up with the next big dream and go, okay, if we were going to do that, here's how we would break it down. And then today, implementers, I just need you to work on this one thing. And when you get that right, it brings harmony. It makes things go faster. It lowers the stress level for everybody, because it's really stressful for me if I have a vision and it's not coming true fast enough. And it's really stressful for my people if I'm putting too much on them and I'm asking them to live in a world that they just have no bearing on. Right. And so you've got to kind of get all those things right. And I've just seen in my personal life, and I've seen in my professional life, that when you do get that right, the harmony, the success rate goes up, the satisfaction rates of everybody involved are high, and people start saying things like, this is the best job I've ever had, and I absolutely love working for this company.
Which, this brings me to a point that I'd love to bring up. I'm not going to do it today, so I'm just going to tease it, and at some point in time, you and I will sit down and talk about this as well, okay? But that is, so much of our corporate culture is about getting that promotion and moving up into another level, usually because it's a higher pay grade, and that actually creates problems. So again, I want to get into that.
Lots
so much.
Of problems.
We'll
that's a whole other discussion.
Although you know what, that might lead into another question that I wanted to ask you, which was, you went through a restructuring, and so I just maybe like to give you a chance to give a brief description of kind of what was that restructuring, what did it look like, how did psychometric assessment help, or understanding personality help in that situation, what was most difficult? Just maybe open it up and then let you go where you want to with that.
Yeah. So like I told you, I got a long-term plan, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get everything right, or you're going to understand what the market wants from you perfectly. You've got to be adaptable as well. And so, like I said, when I started the podcast, I knew one of two things was going to happen. One, it would help me scale my reputation. Maybe I get a better job. Or two, what I really hoped is that it would create business opportunities for me, because I had been a business owner. I had done a successful startup to merger acquisition, and I wanted to do that again. And so when that gentleman came along and said, why don't you start a consulting business? I did the best I could with what I had at the time, and I hired the best people I could, and not all of them were a great fit for where we needed to go long term. And what I've also learned is some people are really, really good for your company when you're in the startup phase. And those people often aren't so good when you get to adding systems and structure, and you start to manage the business with more traditional management styles. And that's what I found, is that after a few years, I got to a point where I needed to make some changes and I needed to restructure the company. But then we also were scaling and growing as well. So we had new departments coming up, and whole new divisions were being created to meet the demand of the market, and to fill those things that our clients were asking for. And so I used my access to traits to be able to first do it, what I call an organization design chart. So it's not just an organization chart of what you have, you designing the company you're building. And I put all the roles of what it would need to look like for me to hit my next 5-year target, knowing everything I knew now after being into it for 5 years. And unfortunately, yeah, that did mean there was a couple people that just didn't fit. And, we said goodbye to them, and we hired different people, and people that were more closely aligned to the job models that we had created for the future. And what that has done is it allowed those people to kind of grow into the roles. And as the company started to mature, they were able to mature along with it as well and find their place where they were best used in our organization. And so we added a lot of implementers because in the beginning we didn't have a lot of implementers. We had initiators and we had some facilitators, but we didn't have a lot of people to do the actual day-to-day work. And so we when we restructured our leadership, and then we added a whole bunch of implementers so we could start getting stuff done.
And then I guess that's the problem with initiators, the founders, the people who get the startup going, is we're always thinking in the future. We're always thinking about how do we grow this? How do we take that next step? What do we get to in 20, 25, 30 years? The often the ball that we drop is the details that are needed now. And we need people who are experts at that. Actually, you talked about your dad. I've got a story like that with my brother, a very similar, where I'm like, we need somebody to translate for us because we're so different. And both of us are excellent at what we do. It's not about one person being right or wrong. It's not about good or bad. And that's another point that I wanted to bring up here is and ask you about it. When we have certain roles, often when an assessment comes in like this, people go, "Oh no, heads are going to roll. This is bad news. This is going to be destructive for the company or the culture or me as a person." And what I heard as you were talking was, "Hey, I released these people that were suffering in their current job role. They weren't doing well. I was frustrated with them. We released them to go somewhere where they could fit." And you know what? I've done the same thing. I've helped people in that way and say, "Hey, listen, look for something like this. This is going to be a good fit for you and you will enjoy life more and flourish in this." And at the same time, you're now promoting people or hiring into positions where those people are going to flourish too. So it truly is better for everyone. What are your thoughts on that? Where would you take that?
Yeah. And I mean, our personal company's why is rooted in the fact that the trucking industry is the backbone of society. Like without trucks, you don't have food, you don't have energy, you don't have clothing, you don't have medicine. So if heavy duty people flourish and do well, then the trucking industry flourishes. And then by extension, society flourishes. And so we're in the business of helping heavy duty people flourish. How can I do that with my clients if I can't even do that for my own people? So I take that very seriously. Flourishing is really important to me. And that's why when you think about what's like the importance of specific roles in the company, there's a tendency to, yes, say, okay, if you're in leadership, maybe are you more valuable than the implementer? Well, guess what? A bunch of leaders with no implementers, nothing gets done. So we kind of look at it like, I mean, obviously there's hierarchy in our company. There's pay scale in our company based on the role that you do. That's just, you can't get away from that. But as a company, our employees win as a team. So the bonuses, it's a team effort. And I remind our initiators that our implementers are just as important as they are. And the facilitators play their role as well. So yeah, I think that helping people to flourish and helping them to find their place in the world should be a big part of your mission, regardless of what industry you're in. And certainly if you can do that internally, then I would say that positions you to do that externally in whatever market you serve.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. You talk about teams. A lot of people are. I mean, teams are a buzzword, and they're also an accurate term for how things need to work. But I think about sports really quickly. I'm always hesitant to bring up a sports analogy, but taking somebody out of their position, taking the quarterback and putting them at safety, or taking the center and moving them to guard, or taking whatever, the goalie and moving them to right wing, whatever the analogy you think of. That's not a fit. It's not going to work out for anyone. The person who moves is miserable. And the person, the coach is miserable. Everyone on that team is going to be miserable because it's not a fit anymore. And then allowing people to find exactly what works for them. And then, and you talked about this at the beginning of our interview, training them in what they're good at and getting the most out of them is far better than trying to train like a human to be a bear. That's not going to work long term, right? So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, and I have a philosophy too that the employees come first. If I take care of my employees, they take care of my customers. Customers take care of the business. Business takes care of me. And I don't think everybody gets that. But in my opinion, the old adage of the customer is always right. It's like, yeah, I know where that came from. But to me, my focus is not on the customer right now. My focus is on my people. Their focus is on the customer. If you get that right, it works.
Exactly. That's in the customer's best interest, because you're not the person to directly take care of the customer. It's the team that takes care of the customer. I agree with that completely. Okay. Good. Well, I want to be careful with our time here. I really appreciate your time, Jamie. I appreciate your help in a lot of different ways. I think you know that. Please tell people again, how would they reach you for consulting? How do they reach out to listen to your podcast? What information do they need to know to reach you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, and then now LinkedIn has that nice option to just book an appointment. There's a link there. So if you go on my LinkedIn profile, you can definitely find me there. Our consulting business, the website is heavydutyconsulting.com, and our podcast is heavydutypartsreport.com. So if you put those 3 links in your show notes, there is no way that people will not be able to find me.
They will be there, and I highly encourage you. Jamie, you can tell this, but Jamie's excellent at whatever he does. He does a good job. He makes sure that he takes care of people around himself. So yeah, please go and support him and learn as much as you can from him as well. Jamie, again, thank you so much for being our guest here. Thank you for being our first guest here. It was a pleasure just getting to know you a little bit here.
It was absolutely my pleasure, and lots of success for you in the future with this new podcast. I think it's phenomenal what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Jamie. Enjoy your week. Isn't Jamie great? I loved that interview. Thank you so much for listening. So much information there, but as promised, I wanted to cover the cost of a hire. Now, it really depends on the role that you're hiring into, what wage you're going to be paying them. There are so many metrics that go into this, so many numbers, so many aspects to consider. For example, we need to think about the resources required in identifying the need and developing a thorough job profile for a position, and all the people that it takes to do that, or the time that it takes to do that. Sometimes it's an HR position. Sometimes there are directors and VPs giving input to that as well. There's also time and money expended advertising the job on job boards, the time invested required to examine resumes and pre-screen candidates. There's setting up interviews, potential candidates. Along with that, again, there are department leaders and managers investing time to support the HR staff. Then there's also conducting the interviews themselves, which often requires multiple interviews with a few potential candidates. There's the hard costs of hiring, training, loss of productions while waiting for competency. There are lots of costs that go into this. So again, I've spent a ton of time researching this. Here's what I've found. The range starts at around $4,000 to $6,000. So this is like minimum wage, hiring the entry-level positions in a company. The cost is going to be about $4,000 to $6,000. So again, the cost then doubles if we are hiring the wrong person and needing to rehire that position. All right. Again, this now goes up. If we get into more complex job positions, if we're hiring directors or C-suite level people, the costs go through the roof. So I've seen anywhere from middle management of $28,000, $30,000 up to 1.5 times an annual salary. That's astronomical. The normal hire that we're making is entry level, maybe to mid management, and those ranges again are going to be around $5,000 to $30,000, right in there. The rule of thumb that I took from all this research is that even if all we're doing is hiring entry level people, if that's it, again, that's the lowest cost generally to a company, still $5,000 every single time we're rehiring, that's a big cost, especially if it's happening after just a few weeks or a couple of months. This now becomes an endless process. So feel free to ask questions, reach out to us. Hopefully this was insightful, and hopefully you're not spending that money or really wasting that money on your own hires. We have a great document that we've put together, brand new download, that allows people to get by the 5 biggest hiring mistakes for medium-sized companies that we see out there, that we can see over and over and over again. If you can avoid these mistakes, if you can correct them, if you can hire well, this makes the biggest difference to making the process smooth, which actually makes a lot more money. Enjoy your day.